Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Covenant Couples. But today we're doing it with a difference. And what do I mean by that? Well, why are you only seeing me? Well, I am the host, and today I get the honor and the privilege of being able to interview my wife, Sharon Boyes. Sharon, welcome to Covenant Couples. I know you're normally the co-host, but a few of the young women in our group have been saying, we want to hear from Sharon. And you know what? In the media world, sometimes they reckon you got to give the people what they want. I mean that as a joke, of course. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you.
Okay, so the topic of the conversation was really all around being a wife, a mother, and a woman in today's world. But before we get into that, I want you know how this goes, to share a little story for God's glory. How did Jesus' story become Sharon's story? Sharon?
Well, when I obviously knew Jesus, I knew God because I went to an Anglican school, so I always knew about it. My parents always brought me up that way. We never went to church, but I knew of Jesus and of God. And when I first got divorced from my first husband, I used to always talk to my grandmother because that's who I used to relate to, even when she was alive. I spent a lot of times with my grandmother, and it wasn't until I met Chris that he said to me, though you probably think you're talking to your grandmother, but you're actually talking to God. So I started going to church with Chris, and I was listening to the pastor, and something just hit me. I can't even remember what it is today, and I was crying. And a friend of ours, Miss Eddie, he's a guy who's from Liverpool. He says to me, "Would you like to come to my house for a coffee?" So Chris and I went to his house for a coffee, and we're chatting and we're talking, and he says to me, "Oh, would you like to give your heart to the Lord?" And I went, "Yeah, sure." So we did the prayer, and it just went from there. And that's when Chris and he asked me to marry him, and we got married, and everything's just history from there. And we've just got, I've just got closer and closer to God as time has gone along.
So, given that the topic is being a wife, a mother, a woman in today's world, from my perspective, I just wanted to see if we could maybe look at some questions together that would sort of explore those kind of topics. You know, as a woman who, you're not a young teenager anymore, not in your 20s or your 30s. What sort of things do you think that women really have to deal with today, especially young women who are maybe in their 20s and 30s now? Sharon, what would you say in your opinion that might be?
There's a lot. When I first had my first child, I was 17. I think life was a lot easier then because we had more family around us.
Sure.
Nowadays, a lot of the younger people, their partners, men or women, their partners are either working away and they're kind of on their own a lot. And when they're a young mum, it's very hard for you to have um, children, maybe one or even up to three children, four children, and your partner's not with you. And it puts a lot of pressure on you just to be that one parent, especially when in today's world they don't believe that you should discipline your children the way I used to be disciplined. Because, I mean, 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, if you did something wrong, you got a smack. Um, but nowadays, obviously, politically correct, you can't do that. You have to discipline your children a different way. And sometimes it's harder for younger people, younger women, to actually enforce that. And children become more let me say, a little bit more naughtier than they were before because they think they can get away with what they can get away
Hmm.
with. And it's just hard because I mean, I feel really sorry. I would hate to be a child, a young mother today in today's world because there's just so much, so differently, so much technology and so much out there. There's not much help, and a lot of young couples because their partners are working away, they move to different areas of the country, different states,
Hmm.
and away from their immediate family, so they don't have a village type of to look after their
Hmm.
children. They're just
Yeah.
them, and they just depend on friends, and sometimes their friends are just in the same situation as they are, so it can
Right.
be really hard for them.
Yeah. I guess it's fair to say that there's a lot more challenges to deal with today, especially post-pandemic. A lot of isolations, particularly, like if you're a young mum raising children and you've moved into a different state, and suddenly you're finding you're going through lockdowns and isolations, and that would be really hard. And you and I, we've seen how our daughters-in-law have dealt with some of the challenges of screen time. You pick up on that, and
Yeah,
how, like, with a developing young mind, it's so important to manage that. But when the young mum's got no support or there aren't too many people close by, sometimes that could be the only time she gets any peace. So
yeah,
that's really good to pick up on that. Like, it is important to manage your screen time for your children. But if you haven't got that kind of support, or that, it takes a village to raise a child type of support system around you, it can make it really hard. Do you think it's important that young mums look out for maybe family friendly type churches that would help maybe address some of those challenges for them, Sharon?
oh, for sure, for sure. It's just finding the right church. There's a lot of churches out there who do try to help, but I think they tend to want the whole family. So if you go there with your husband and your wife and the children,
Mm,
they tend to be
true.
more acceptable to you. But if you go in there as a single woman, okay,
Mhm.
you're married, but you go in there on your own with the children. It's very hard, and it's very hard
Right,
for a woman to actually do that on her own because
right.
you do things like that as a family. So you probably go to church when your husband's home, but when the husband's away, you tend to stay away because you just feel, I don't know, you just feel differently because a lot of the time people respond to you because of your husband, not because of you.
And I guess you would say, as the wife of myself, that's why we believe in the hybrid model, because even though online church is great, it shouldn't be the replacement for meeting face to face, but it can work in well with people who maybe prefer not to go to a physical place until hubby's home. And as we always say, online connection is still a connection, but
Mm.
it should be something that maybe supplements meeting face to face. But we do love it when people join us online, as you know. So I guess you could say that, being a family friendly church, we don't really mind how people connect with us. That's for sure. So just let's just move on to another topic. Do you think, like, if you were, as I spoke to you when we were preparing for this interview, as an older woman, what would you say to your younger self right now, in terms of, you're a young woman who's in her maybe late teens, early 20s, and she's thinking, oh, you know what, I wouldn't mind finding a guy. I wouldn't mind finding someone who, I'd like to maybe get married to, settle down with. What would be your advice right now to your younger self, and to what advice would you give a young woman in terms of how she would know that someone is the right man for her? Of course, from a Christian perspective, and obviously realizing that, you'd be praying about this. What would be some of the things that you believe a woman should look for in the man that she's hoping to meet one day?
Yeah, for me personally, because I had a fantastic relationship with my father, and I still do. A lot of women don't, but for me, I did, and I would look for someone similar to him, like very kind, very thoughtful, very gentle, and very um, I can't think of the word, very supportive, because he's very supportive of my mum, my mother. He always helped her. He always does things. They will, even now, he still helps her and does things. They've kind of become a team. So you're looking for some. I would look for someone who was a team. Um, my first husband, I was very young when I met him, so I didn't really know any different. I went straight from home to being married to him. I was pregnant at the time. I was 17. I had Daniel when I was 18. So I didn't really know any different, and I learnt how to be a mother and a wife. Not so much from my own mum, because my mum worked a lot, but from my ex-mother-in-law, and she taught me a lot. But she taught me how to cook, how to be a mum, how to be a wife, and so I kind of had to learn on the job, and that becomes quite hard. But if you've got someone, a husband who's very supportive of you, or a man who's very supportive of you, that can help a lot. So that's what I would say to my younger self: find someone who will respect you as a wife and as a mother.
And I think probably a way to add to that would be obviously when you first meet a guy, you can't say, "Can I meet your mum and dad and check them out?" And that's obviously not what we've meant. What we were getting at is, when you start getting to know a guy and you're starting to think maybe this might go somewhere, just sort of, you can usually tell by their actions and how they are, whether they're kind, respectful, thoughtful. And I think it's really important from my perspective that that you see they actually do respect women, and because guys can put false flattery on, and guys
Yeah.
can actually say all the right sweet talk,
Mm.
and it's not. Can I say it's not? It's pretty hard not to get swept up in all that. So that I would just like to add to that if a guy's genuine and he's definitely respectful, you've got a pretty good idea that he got that from somewhere, right? So
Mm.
more than likely he got that from his mum and his dad. I know for myself personally, I'm very grateful to my mum that she taught me to respect women. Let's just go another slightly different direction. Um, you know, as a mother, I mean, we have touched on this already, and let's just see if we can explore this in a little bit more detail. Um, what sort of things have you picked up in your years as a mother? Because you come across to me as someone who's very wise and has a lot of patience and can be quite calm. Do you think as a mother it's really important to be consistent on how you approach boundaries with children?
Oh, for sure, for sure. We always, my ex and I always, we always taught our kids to respect us, to honour his mum and dad. They were always taught to never argue with us or talk to us or be nasty to us. Um, but we also, it wasn't control, but we always made sure that the children that they were hanging around with were the right children. And many times, what the boys would, when they were teenagers or even younger, would have friends come over and sleep, and you could pick up straight away what type of child this was, and you could see that there would be you'd see the difference in my boys when they were hanging around with these children, and we'd say to them, we don't want you to see these children anymore, or hang out with these kids. And luckily our children did that, and they would stop seeing them, or they'd see them at school only, but they wouldn't invite them over. So we were pretty lucky that they did what they were told, and what we asked them to do they would do. But it doesn't always work that way, and sometimes children do hang out with the wrong children. We did have issues with one of my sons. He did have a lot of problems with certain kids he was hanging out with, but we just sorted that out. And mainly because I was working when he was a teenager, when he was in school. He had to take his little brother to school, pick him up, bring him home, and stay with him for about an hour before I come home from work. And I think he kind of resented the fact that he couldn't see his friends or go out, so he used to retaliate. He used to rebel against that. But I stopped working, and I started working for my husband's business at the time, so I could be there when they went to school, and I picked them up from school. So if he needed to go out anywhere or do anything like that, he still had time to spend with the friends. And that's when it's kind of he stopped being that type of child, and then started doing his own thing, and then he was a lot happier in the way he was doing things.
I think, personally, being married to you and being able to watch our daughters-in-law and the job that they've done, I've learned a lot from Corey, and I've learned it's really important to be age appropriate, is how she
Yes,
would use the words. A
yeah,
2-year-old cannot be expected to always remember to pick up their toys. So why
exactly.
get frustrated about something that they just don't have the mental maturity to achieve? And that's
Mm,
something I taught just watching her. And another thing that I've learned from her is that a child can't handle it when they can't get their own way. So
mm,
rather than be angry at them when they're chucking a big tantrum at Coles, a local shopping centre, and try to remain calm, allow them to experience their negative emotions. Um,
yeah.
I think one of the things that really annoys me, Sharon, is the judgmental looks that you get from people, and people looking down on young mums because their child's having a big tantrum. That child doesn't know how to cope with that emotion, she taught me, Corey.
Exactly.
They just don't know. Their brains are not wired to
Mm,
a point of maturity where they can handle the word no. And so I think it's really important that that mums realise it's okay if your kid's chucking a tantrum. You're not a terrible mother. The mother's just finding the child rather is just finding it hard to hear no from mum. You can't have that or that, and that's something that I learned. And as I watch my grandkids getting older, and Corey often says, "Use your words, Harriet. Use your words." And I think to a certain extent that challenged my mindset. And I think there's a lot to be said for some of the techniques and the approaches to discipline now. I think in some ways when my kids were little, I maybe was a bit too quick with the smack. Don't want to get into whether we should keep doing that or not today. That can be maybe a topic for another time. But I just think that there's so many pressures on young mums today that they need all the support and love and help that they can get. And I'm not trying to do a plug for our church, but we really believe in being a family-friendly church and helping mums in any way that we can. And if all they can do is come online and just join our online service, that's fine. They just need all the help and encouragement and support that they can possibly get. I really believe that. So just talking about being a wife now, we're very transparent. We're very authentic people. That's why we're called Authentic Voices, and we've been married before. We're not going to hide from that. So I would like to maybe tease out this topic a little bit, because one of the things that's become really obvious to me, just talking to some of the younger women that belong to our fellowship or part of our group or joining our church services online, is there seems to be a lot of pressure on women, particularly who are divorced, to get married or to find a partner. How come you're single? And I know that we got married and fell in love, and that was wonderful. But you were single for a couple of years, and so was I, single for a little while. Do you think there's a lot of pressure on women who? I mean, one of the people that's part of our board, she even shared openly with me herself the comments, the pressures, the things that have been said to her. How can you be single and you should be married? And da, da, da. And I just really think that that's not fair, especially because I never copped that as a bloke. The churches seem to be more understanding of a guy who wants to stay single. Talk to me about that. What's your opinion on that? What's your perspective on that? Are women being expected to get married, especially if she's divorced? Why haven't you got married again yet? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of pressure on women to get married. I don't know why. It seems like, oh, you're a woman, you should be married, you should be having kids, you should be looking after your husband, looking after your family. But if you're a single mother and you've got divorced, all you're worried about is looking after your children. You don't need another man in your life because you've just got rid of one, obviously, for a reason. So you need to concentrate on your children. Single women who've been married and divorced, obviously there was an issue there. But I don't think there should be pressures on women. You know what I mean? We seem to think that the world today seems to think that men can be single, go out there and do whatever they need to do because they can do this and do that, but women can't. It's like, oh, how dare you be a woman and not get married? How dare you have a career and not have children? I mean, it's really ridiculous because in a day of being equal today, we shouldn't have that problem. We shouldn't be having that pressure on us to be a mother, be a wife. We've probably been there, done that. You know what I mean? I've been a wife. I've been divorced. I had children. I was looking after Adrian when I first met Chris. He was still only young when I got divorced. He was still only 15. So I looked after Adrian. He still lived at home. I met Chris. By then, Adrian had already moved out and he was with his girlfriend. Um, so when I met Chris, I was on my own. Women get lonely like men do, but sometimes we cope better without a man because um, depends on the relationship you had with a man before or relationship you've had in your past as a child. Certain things you find it easier to be on your own. You do things better on your own, and sometimes a man complicates things. So there shouldn't be a an issue that we are on our own, and we shouldn't feel pressured. It's stupid. We shouldn't feel pressured. I mean, why do we have to be pressured, and why can't a man? Why can't a man have a wife and have children? Because they're supposedly the breadwinner. But women can be breadwinners too. I mean, I know quite a few women who brought children up on their own, done it all by themselves without the husband, without the father, and they've done really well. and they're successful in what they're doing now. So I can't see an issue, and I think it's just a quality thing. It should be changed, my opinion.
Well, in a lot of ways, obviously there have been some improvements in that area, in that space, but I would like to add that, um, there shouldn't be any pressures on women to get married. There shouldn't be any pressures on men to get married. And the only thing I would say is, what are the reasons? And I talked to this about someone. I'm not going to mention her name for privacy reasons, but what are the reasons? And if the reasons are that you're too afraid to get hurt again, or if the reasons are that you don't want to try again, or you don't want to bet on love again, that really is even between you and God. And you need to know what you're ready for and what you believe God is saying to you. I just really want to encourage women, particularly if you're getting pressured, if you're getting hassled, maybe the people aren't the right people for you. And I'm certainly not telling anyone to leave their church, but I don't think anyone around you should be pressuring you. Just want to add that, to what my wife's saying here. No one should be pressuring you. No one should be hassling you. But if you feel like there's hurts or there's wounds that are preventing you, obviously the Lord is the great healer, and maybe talk to him. But one of the things I would like to add, and I know this interview is about my wife, Sharon, is that I really think it's important that you look at some of the things. If you are divorced like I was, and your first marriage wasn't a very, very good one like mine at all, then maybe it might be worth getting some counselling and maybe looking at some of the things that are in you that toxic people are drawn to. And I'm really grateful and I'm really thankful that my mother helped me so much, and I did counselling, and I got to deal with some issues in my life. Because when I first met Sharon, she was such an incredible woman, but wasn't a normal type I would go for. And I challenged myself and said, why not? Why not? Because Sharon is quite healthy mentally, emotionally, and physically. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not going to go into any other stuff, because let's just say I wasn't good at choosing the right type until I met Sharon, and I woke up to myself and started to own some stuff I needed to deal with. So I just want to say that as an encouragement, ladies. If maybe the wrong type came around the first time or the second, maybe just be willing to consider there might be some things to work on and God to heal. Can I say it like that? But I mean, any judgment in that, just think it's really important, because, there's nothing wrong with being single, and there's nothing wrong with looking to get married again if you are looking to get married again and you're divorced. But it just needs to be for the right reasons, and really that is between you and God. Amen. That is really between you and God. And I just wanted to say that to add on to what Sharon was saying. So yeah, we talked about being a wife. We've talked about being a mother. Let's talk about being a grandmum, because you are a grandmum. You have 7 wonderful grandchildren, which I do too, of course. And
Because 3 of them are yours from your
just
side.
from your perspective, I'm really interested. What did you think is the role of grandmothers, and obviously not just free babysitters? What do you think is the role of grandmothers in today's world? Let's just touch on that topic a little bit, and then we'll close out the interview soon. Thanks, Sharon.
Well, being a grandmother, you do things with your grandkids what you didn't do with your children. Like for instance, spoil them, because that's your that's your priority. You're allowed to, even though the parents don't like it, you still do. But it's also to teach them different values, because obviously your values, you've brought your children up, their parents up in a certain value, and hopefully that they are using them values on their children, which thankfully for me, my children do. And my daughter-in-laws are wonderful girls, and they both come from good families, and they both have good values, and they bring their children up with good values. So I just reinforce that when I'm with my children. They do get away with a little bit more with me, especially Chris. They do get away with us, and they do things what they shouldn't really do, or eat things they shouldn't really eat. But that's our privilege to do that with them, because we didn't do that with our children. My children's grandparents did the same thing. They got spoiled. But you still have to have certain values, and still if your children are if their parents are bringing them up a certain way and they don't want them to eat certain things, if they don't want them to do certain things, you have to respect that, and you have to respect that they want that done for a reason. So they're okay with you doing it, going over the board a little bit, but when it comes to certain things, you have to respect that that's what they want for their children, and you just go along with that, and you just try and enjoy them as much as possible, because they only little for so long, and they grow up really quick and become teenagers and become moody like our granddaughter. But we love her for who she is, and she has good values. Just that she's going through a teenage years at the moment. But we love her, and that's just part of being a grandmother.
We've got a really interesting age range now. We've got a 17-year-old who's driving her own car. Wow.
Yes.
I still remember the days she was on my legs as a baby, grabbing my beard. And we've got so that's Alexis, and then Hudson's, if I get this right, Sharon, nearly 11, and crazy on basketball. And yeah. And then we've also got Harriet and Avery. And we've got Harriet's the youngest, and then through my tribe we've got I'm going to have trouble remembering all this, but
Got
we've
Chloe,
got
who's 17,
yeah yeah
Declan, who's 11, 10, and Willow, who's 18 months.
you women are so much better than us guys on some of this stuff, especially when it comes to birthdays as well. Yeah,
So we've got two 17-year-olds down to 18 months.
yeah, exactly. Look, I think we've touched on some really good subjects. I think being a woman in today's world is really hard, Christian or non-Christian. I think women can be particularly hard on each other when it comes to their image, when it comes to their looks, when it comes to their weight.
Definitely.
I think women need to be very intentional about the kind of friendships that they engage in, especially Christian women. Be around women that build you up. Be around women that encourage you. Be around women who want to help you with finding your voice and knowing who you really are. And authentic voices, we really believe in the voice of women being honoured, Sharon, don't we? We really believe that women have a place and a purpose that's very precious in the body of Christ.
Yes.
And I just really wanted to add that in. We haven't even really touched on that. But yeah, let's go there just for a few minutes, eh? Talk to me about what's it been like for a woman, growing up in a world, it's never not been the case, where so much seems to be expected of women in terms of their self-image, their weight. There's a lot of men out there who are very shallow. That's a big one. You start dating men and they start making comments about your weight, go sideways, ladies.
Yes.
I'll leave it at that.
Exactly.
Okay. And makeup and putting hair. Listen, ladies, from a man's point of view, nothing wrong with having your hair nice. Nothing wrong with wearing makeup and nice dresses. But if you're doing that to define your identity and your self-image, that's sad. You shouldn't need to. There's nothing wrong with any of that. So I'm getting a prompting from the Holy Spirit. Yes, let's go there. Sharon, talk to us about it.
Yeah, well, in today's world, there's a lot of image about all these models. Most of the pictures you see in the books are all photoshopped. There's no way a woman would look the way they do. There's a lot of pressure on young girls to be thin, to be skinny. And it's the same with women, with wives. I mean, you marry a man, and you're slim and you're skinny, and your husband loves you because of that. And then you have a child, and your body changes, and you get bigger hips. Sometimes you get a bit of a belly, and sometimes some women go back to what they were before. Lucky them, but a lot of women don't, and they end up with a little bit more weight than what they were, and their husbands kind of feel pressured. Their husbands pressure them to lose weight, and that's wrong. You know what I mean? They need to understand that this woman has just given them a child, has just bared this baby, and what a woman's body goes through when she's having a child is enormous, and it's not always easy for a woman to lose that weight. So men need to understand that they have to love their wives for who they are, not for what they look like. And if they truly love you, then they need to understand that your body is going to change. And if you have 3 or 4 children, obviously you're not going to be the skinny, tight body you had when you first married him. you're going to have a bit of weight on. You could be actually quite big. And I mean, he has to understand that you are still the same person, but you've given him 4 beautiful children, or maybe 5 beautiful children, or even 1 or 2 beautiful children. And he needs to understand that the woman goes through a lot to have that child. And it's hard for her to get back to what she is. It's she doesn't have time for exercise. She doesn't have time to make healthy meals. I mean, if she's got 5 children, 4 children, you're busy making food as quick as possible to get into their mouths because they're hungry. And when you've got hungry kids, it's not a good look. It's not a good thing. So wives don't always have time to go to the gym. They don't have time to do things for themselves. So husbands need to understand that. And if you can't find a man who doesn't like you for that or love you for that, then tell him, kick him to the curb. Basically, don't get involved with him.
Yeah, my nickname for Sharon is the Lioness now, and I'm really glad she went there and tackled this topic. Can I just say, from my perspective as a man, you didn't marry your wife for the weight that she has. You married her for the woman that she is. And that shouldn't change or alter, especially after she's had your baby, your child, and she's brought that child into the world. And I think that men that are insecure in their own identity tend to be ones who are also insecure in their wife's weight, looks, image. Shouldn't be the case. And it comes back to honor, and it comes back to understanding what the Bible really means when it says to lay down your life for your wife. These things shouldn't be a focus or shouldn't be important to you as a man. Enough said. I could keep going on about the topic, but I believe that when you marry a woman, you marry her for who she is, not what you want her to look like.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Okay, so is there any closing thoughts? Is there anything that you want to say just as we come towards the conclusion, and then we'll finish it off, and then we'll share it with our family and friends. This is a pre-recorded interview, but we hope you've enjoyed the live interview that we've done, like a pre-record. Sorry if I've confused the matter. I think people know what I mean.
Well, I'd
Any closing thoughts?
just like to say one thing to all the women out there, young, old. Just be yourself. Don't change for anybody. If you have to change for anybody, they're not worth it. You just need to be yourself. Do what you want to do, not what anybody else wants to do. That's all that matters. Just be yourself. Don't change for nobody.
Well, as we always like to say, whenever we do any kind of media for Authentic Voices, I think I'd like you to close it out. What do we always say about being authentic, Sharon?
For being authentic brings life.
Amen. God bless you, everybody.
Bye.